And you admitted, in your own words, that the cop homeowner wasn't going to, quote, catch any shit, right?
Correct.
Because you were out to quote, make this cut and dry. Isn't that right?
The homeowner wasn't going to catch any because Mr. Elba had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death.
Because you were going to make sure that the case was cut and dry. Those were your words, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
And Trooper Proctor, it would be far easier for you to pin it on the girl who's just a whack job, in your words, who you hope yourself, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Shame on you, sir.
What?
Shame on you, sir. Shame on you, sir. Shame on you, sir.
Oh my God!
Objection.
All right, so jurors, disregard that. I've told you before, lawyers can't make comments. They can ask questions. And Mr. Jackson, you know better than
I
that.
understand. That's all I have.
Mr. Lally?
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody? Wanted to talk to you today about Karen Reed defense and her sleazy tactics. If you didn't catch the opening, I echo that mean, oh my God. Holy heck, what? I've never seen a lawyer do that in court without apologizing, which means that was tactical, planned, done, knowing that Alan Jackson was going to get an objection and an objection sustained. So what does that mean? Why would you do something if you knew you were going to get your objection sustained? Because you wanted to have an effect on the jurors. Anyway, you know it can't be done. You know it is against the rules of the court, but you're going to do it anyway. And we're going to watch it again. And look at his demeanor afterwards. No apology. I understand. That's not an apology. I understand. That's all I have. I'm done. You'll hear no more of me. And I'm not going to go over Proctor's explosive cross-examination again. I feel like it was Groundhog's Day again with it. Nothing new was revealed. It's the same stuff. They're mulling over and over and over again to, mind-numbing effect, trying to make him look like a bad guy, trying to make him look like this investigation was a tunnel vision investigation. And anybody who's been following my show for a long time knows that I've talked about this talking point in the innocence movement or the wrongful conviction movement. They love to say that investigators have tunnel vision, that they didn't look at anyone else. Who were they supposed to look at? Seriously. I know the free Karen readers are out there, but just looking at the evidence, Karen Reed's own statements, plus cracked tail light all over the scene, no opportunity to plant any evidence. Who were they supposed to look at? Were they really supposed to go within a 20-block radius of 34 Fairview and just put crime scene tape around it and waterboard every single person in the house? Is that what the Free Karen readers want? Because I don't know anymore. This is one of the most guilty defendants that's ever been. And please tell me how butt calls and 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon and what else do we have? Because Ian Whiffin's going to come with a House Long to Die in the Cold search and explain that it was an open browser real soon. I mean, how many little conspiracies have you guys started that have turned out to be untrue? And you still go back to Yannetti, Jackson, Aiden Kearney, Karen Reed herself, like the word is gospel. When they've lied to you so many times, you're the mark. If you don't know who the mark is, you're the mark. You ever heard that expression? That adage? It's you guys, Free Karen readers. You're the mark. You're being conned. It's not me. You're being conned. I know it's entertaining for everybody to think about this as some big conspiracy and like Lally's the devil and terrible. But I have news for you. This isn't a play. It's not a movie. It's not a TV series. It's not for your amusement. This is a court proceeding, and sometimes, guess what? They move very slowly sometimes, and sometimes they're very boring and hard to watch and hard to listen to. Not easy. It's not the Cliff Notes. But I was so amazed by Alan Jackson's sleazy tactics in court to shame Michael Proctor, someone who's never had any kind of problem with his job before Karen Reed came along. Excuse him for being a little miffed at what she did to John O'Keefe. Excuse her. Excuse him for using some offensive language in the middle of one of the worst investigations to something that's happened to his fellow officer. I don't know if he's ever investigated a murder of a fellow officer before, and he doesn't pick the charges. I hope everybody heard that loud and clear. We're going to go over Lally's redirect, and we're going to go over the end of that. Also, some interesting things that got sustained for the defense that I want to explain. That's what's on the agenda today. Let's get into it. But I was so shocked by Jackson's sleazy tactics that I literally took a huge gasp, scared one of my cats, went flying, because this is just not done in a courtroom. It's not done. I know you might have seen it on Matlock or something, but it's not done in real life. And for him not even to apologize to the court, and they know, I mean, this defense team knows that they can just get away with whatever they want, don't have to apologize, walk all over the judge. She reprimands them either in front of the jury now, they don't care, they just keep doing it, or in sidebar, they keep doing these inappropriate things, and it goes on and on and on. When do these defense attorneys face consequences? And my fear is the answer is never. That they're perpetual line steppers, line crossers, rule breakers, and that's the way they go through life. And with a sense of entitlement, they can do what they want, and no one's going to stop them. They're too rich, too powerful. No one's going to call them out in a courtroom in Little Canton, Mass. especially Hollywood Jackson, who represented Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey. So let's get into this last bit of Proctor's cross. And so he planned this out. I'm sure this was the last bit he wrote to say, shame on you. Shame on you, Alan Jackson. All this money for defending a murderer, and I know everyone has a right to a defense, but is this the way you have to conduct it? Seriously? Seriously? This sleazy?
Shame on you, sir.
Objection.
All right, so jurors, disregard that. I've told you before, lawyers can't make comments. They can ask questions. And Mr. Jackson, you know better than that.
That's all I have.
Mr. Lally?
See, because it's for the free Karen readers. Because I was once a mark, a true crime mark too. I really thought that lawyers really believed what they were saying. He knows everything out of his mouth is a distraction. Everything out of his mouth is nonsense, not important. He knows Proctor's probably a pretty good guy who didn't do anything. This is all theater. But he's got to communicate to the free Karen readers with the drop of the thing and the shame on you, drop of the notebook, shame on you, that this is really a bad guy. And to the jury, don't forget the jury. He's got to just get one. Maybe one juror to fight for an acquittal and convince all the rest of them that this was some kind of conspiracy. I thought that was disgusting. And I judge Canone has totally lost control of her courtroom. She's got to start. They know she's not going to give any consequences to anything that they do. Don't hand over the material about the defense witnesses. Oh, you have till tomorrow to get it in. Don't worry about it. It's like a teacher who has like a student who's constantly distracting and disrupting the entire classroom. And it's like the teacher's pet and nothing gets done. So let's take a look at Lally's cross. I was just disgusted. I may never stop throwing up from that end of that cross-examination.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Now, when you had started with cross-examination the other day, you were asked questions about whether or not in August of 2022, you disliked or did not like Mr. Yannetti, correct?
That's correct.
Why was that?
Well, basically, he stood up in open court and spouted lie after lie about me, called me corrupt and conflicted, dragged my name through the mud after I spent 10 plus years without a single complaint filed against me, and he had no basis. And
Look at Karen Reed. She's like a vampire. She loves this. And this is a theme that I've seen in my work with true crime, that the accused or the convicted love turning it around, love accusing those that got them, either got a confession out of them, or got the evidence, or investigated the case, or tried the case, that they're really the corrupt people and they're just a victim of this corrupt system. And you can see it's like she's like a vampire. Like, this is her lifeblood that she's getting from Proctor being openly humiliated in court and made to be a villain. And the free Karen readers haven't stopped going after him and his wife. And that will change their life forever. They'll never have a feeling of safety in the same way ever again. Never trust people the way they did ever again. always wonder if someone's going to come out of the woodwork, if someone's having ulterior motives. It's really, when your trust in other human beings is irreparably broken, it's an awful thing to happen to you. And it affects your life in all sorts of ways. But this is sport for her. It's like a blood sport.
No facts of these wild accusations, because there are none. This investigation was done with the utmost integrity, not just by me, but my supervisors and other troopers in my office, as well as Mr. Yannetti shows up at my sister's school yesterday in the parking lot where he's not welcomed, or where people are not supposed to be, with one of their witnesses and their private investigator. And a teacher sees this, informs Mr. Yannetti that he can't be there, and instead of saying okay and leaving, he asks, is Courtney Proctor in the building? Does she work here? She calls me to see if she was being served.
Objection. Can we approach?
Yes.
So that's something that got objected to, that will get thrown out. But just like the shame on you will be remembered, because those kinds of objections are remembered. So what is he talking about? Let me show you from Aiden Carney, Turtle Boy. This is Michael Proctor. This is what Michael Proctor is crying about. It's just like a huge team of antisocial personalities or psychopaths, whatever you want to call them. David Yannetti was seen meeting with witness and plow driver Lucky Loughran in Canton yesterday, apparently at an elementary school where Courtney Proctor works. Fact check, you are allowed to meet with witnesses prior to their testimony. That's what he's saying. There were pictures of it on his, and I just want to show you his, hold on one second, on his Twitter. Oh wait, hold on one sec. I gotta pull this off. 1 second. My apologies. Okay, here we go. So this is his interview with David Yannetti about this, why they were meeting. I mean, I understand if you want to meet with Lucky Loughran, but why at the school? Why does that make sense? And why was he asking for Michael Proctor's wife? It doesn't make any sense. And he was eventually asked to leave. So this is his interview with Turtle Boy.
I did not do. I couldn't control my reaction in court.
Steve, do you know what he's talking about with that picture that was going on Twitter? There's like a guy that looks like you talking to Lucky Loughran.
Aiden, that was me.
Oh, that was you.
Oh,
okay,
yes,
all right.
yeah,
So that was
yeah.
you. Okay.
Any lawyer is going to prepare a witness to testify.
Steve.
I took the off day and I went down to Canton because I wanted Lucky Loughran to go through his route with me.
Okay.
Lucky Loughran asked to meet in the Kennedy School parking lot. I had suggested meeting at the DPW. I didn't know who worked there, who went to school there. I don't know Canton. I'm not a South Shore guy. I met with Lucky Loughran with my investigator. We left the parking lot. He took me on his route. We went back to the parking lot, picked up the car, and we left. He made up a conversation out of whole cloth that somebody supposedly approached me and had a conversation with me about leaving.
Something about his sister. I guess his sister works at that school. I don't know.
I have
She's like,
no
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
I have no idea. But I was a firsthand witness today to perjury.
I would take, he's a first-hand witness to perjury. I would take Michael Proctor's word over David Yannetti's any day of the week. Any day of the week. If I was a betting woman, which I'm not, except maybe on this podcast for nobody. Sometimes I predict things just for the fun of it. But I would bet that Michael Proctor is telling the truth and David Yannetti is telling a big fib here, because I know he has no conscience. How do I know he has no conscience? Because of the witness harassment campaign he orchestrated with Alan Jackson and Karen Reed. So this looks like a bunch of nonsense. And I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach when I don't trust what someone's saying. Doesn't mean it's not true. It's just, this is my read of it. And granted, I am a little biased, sorry, against David Yannetti. It's my read from living on planet Earth for as long as I have.
Perjury by the lead investigator who is framing my client. I was a first-hand witness to that today. That explains my reaction in court.
When will Lucky be? Do you expect that?
Wait, we gotta go back.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I was a first-hand witness today to perjury by the lead investigator who is framing my client. I was a first-hand witness to that today. That explains my reaction in court.
When will Lucky be? Do you expect the Commonwealth to call Lucky, or will that just be a defense
I don't know
witness?
if they'll call him or not. I mean, he's on their witness list, but he will be a defense witness.
Okay.
He's not upset at all. He knows that no one framed his client. He knows. He came out originally and said it was a tragic accident. He's lying through his teeth.
He's not called by the Commonwealth. I promise you that.
And does his story remain the same from what we've seen in court filing?
Yes.
He promises that he won't be called by the Commonwealth, but he is on the Commonwealth's witness list, strangely.
Yeah. And good for him. He lives in that community, and he will not be bullied. The truth is the truth. And I look forward to putting Brian Laughlin on the stand.
The truth is the truth, and I just told a big lie. How disgusting. It's just like we're in bizarro reversal world here, aren't we? All right, back to trial. Absolutely revolting. These lawyers lie so easily, don't they? It just comes out of their mouth just so easily. They're slick. So they had to have a sidebar on it. Karen Reed looks like, again, this is where she gets her energy from, this kind of cruelty and fraud upon the court. Yeah, and you know, all the journalists are going to write about just like the well-meaning defense team. Lolly's got to get a different piece of paper or something here. My apologies.
Thank you. May be seated. Close back in session.
Can we just two, please? Jurors, I am striking that last answer. It was probably a partial answer cut off. I'm striking it completely, disregard it. If you took notes, cross the notes out. You're not to consider it in any way. It is completely stricken from the
Completely stricken from the record. Even though I said that should the witnesses, I thought this was a bad call. The witnesses could talk about the harassment in any way, shape, or form, but because David Yannetti went back and swore that that never happened and that this is perjury, now it's going to be stricken from the record. That's my take on it. Jimmy McNutty, thanks for becoming a member. Dean Walker, thanks for the super sticker. Nice to see you.
on the record. And
Molly.
Trooper, I'd suggest you listen to the question being asked.
That was their other argument, that it wasn't in response to the question asked. But they can respond in any way that they see fit to the question asked. I guess that the defense would say that's unresponsive or whatever, I guess, in their objection. I don't know. Not answering the question asked. But, you know, anytime that they want to bring in that harassment, that was what was determined. It's coming in the hearing. Now the judge is buckling to the defense.
Of you before you answer it.
My apologies, Your Honor.
Keep your voice up, Mr. Lally.
Trooper Proctor, let me try that again. As far as you were asked about text messages that occurred in August of 2022 in which you indicated that you did not like Mr. Yannetti, correct?
Correct.
And so at the time of that text message, it was sent in August of 2022. Why was that?
In August of 2022. Why was that?
Yes.
The reasons I laid out, the false accusations of being conflicted and corrupt spouted in an open court, which there's zero evidence of. Like I said, I stand by the integrity of this investigation, as well as every trooper and supervisor in my office.
Were there also motions filed by Mr. Yannetti or by counsel containing photographs of yourself and some children?
Yes.
And what, if anything, were the allegations in regard to the children that were depicted in those photographs?
So the photograph was taken in my parents' backyard.
Objections overruled.
My parents' backyard at a pool party. There's some little kids in the photo. Defense counsel kept insinuating that those were the McCabe's children, when in fact they were my family, my cousins.
Have you at any point in time ever met any children of the McCabe's?
No, sir.
In the course of this investigation, as it was sort of alleged on cross-examination, did you essentially pick a...
So he put pictures of his cousins in the court filings. Do you guys get that, just for those in the back? So yeah, he doesn't like Yannetti too much. He made them fodder for harassment, saying it was some sort of malfeasance. So excuse us for being suspicious, Yannetti. And I would bet, I would trust Michael Proctor again. They've lied so often and been so dishonest in this, which is not unusual for these kind of what I'd call innocence fraud lawyers. And they tried to object to that being brought in, and the judge was like, no, not this time. Not this time. This is coming in. It was an emotion. It's crazy.
a suspect and then try to have the evidence fit that?
Objection. Form, meaning.
In that form, it's stricken. Not allowed to ask it that way, Mr. Lally.
How did you conduct this investigation, you and the other troopers in your office?
From the start of this investigation with an open mind, like I said earlier, we didn't know what we had, possible medical. So as the day went on and we collected more evidence and developed compelling evidence against Ms. Reed.
Now, with reference to this investigation, it continued after January 29th, 2022, when you had those text communications with your friends, correct?
Yes.
Was there additional information that you compiled over the course of that investigation following January 29th, 2022?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Following that date of those text messages on January 29th,
Yes.
2022, was there additional information that was gathered over the course of your investigation by yourself or other troopers involved in the investigation?
Yes.
And from that additional information that was gathered, what, if any, information that was gathered throughout the course of the investigation indicated that anyone besides Miss Reed had anything to do with Ms. O'Keefe's death?
All the information gathered after that date indicated no one else was responsible for Mr. O'Keefe's death.
Okay, for those in the back, all roads lead to Karen Reed, what we already knew. And think about it. Think about all the armchair sleuths and experts that have been brought in for the defense. And look at and it's really interesting. There's also a point I really forgot to make about the defense being vague about how these expert witnesses are going to testify. Because I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't just comfortable with just poking a few holes in the state's case instead of presenting a really strong argument that it had to be a fight, it had to be a dog bite, it had to be some kind of attack. Just curious if that is so. Thank you, Kathy Chapin, for the super chat. Thanks, Roberta, for the coverage. You're welcome, Kathy. But it's interesting that in this redirect, he gets to once again elicit from Trooper Proctor the testimony about the harassment, the testimony about why, if he had tunnel vision, why he didn't consider the Alberts or the McCabe suspects. And it's a good talking point because up to now, we've seen a lot of evidence, but it hasn't all been kind of put in order or put in perspective. I think the jurors aren't dumb, hopefully, and have already started to put it into perspective, what it all means. But we've been shown that center console how many times? And we still don't know that. I'm still waiting for the significance of it. We haven't heard about the key cycles, how her car moved. Their accident reconstructionist specialist we haven't heard from. We haven't heard her voicemails, which I think I was really surprised that. I'm hoping that they're coming up soon. That's what I would think the logical witness would be right after Proctor would be Karen Reed's own voicemails to John O'Keefe, calling him some of the worst things in the world, saying, I hate you. This is the man she was supposed to love and care for and just dropped off.
Sir, you were asked some questions on cross-examination about testimony in a prior proceeding and shown specifically at page 01563, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
So, sir, I'm giving you 01562, 63, and 64, and ask you to read those and look up.
What were the numbers again, Mr. Lally?
1562, 63, and 64, I believe. Now, Trooper, after reviewing those 3 pages, is there now more context to what you were just asked about on one specific page of that testimony?
Yes.
And those were questions related to what you had told and what you had informed other people within the office or your supervisors in relation to relationships with both McCabe's and the Albans, correct?
Correct.
And in the course of that testimony, did you relay to that body the same testimony you just relayed to this jury in regard to photographs of children and defense counsel attributing those to being the McCabe's children, which they were not?
Yes.
Now, we were asked some questions by Mr. Jackson in regard to what you knew or why your focus was not on Brian Alberts later on in the evening of January 29, 2022, correct?
Correct.
And why was that? Why was your focus not on Brian Albert at that time?
There was just no evidence that Mr. L was involved anyway. Like I said before, the from witness interviews, the statements Ms. Reed provided to witnesses, the one shoe left at the scene, the taillight pieces found underneath the snow that were dug out by the CERT team, the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe, the one shoe at the hospital that was observed, her statements to us, Sergeant Mechanic and I, while we interviewed her, clearly the broken taillight, and the fact that leaving Brockton, instead of going to Dighton, she backtracked to go to Canton to retrieve her vehicle and then go double back to go to Dighton, which I found odd.
Now, if at any point in time over the course of your investigation you had
I thought that was really interesting. That was the first time it was mentioned that Karen Reed dragged her car to her parents' house in Dighton. I don't remember if correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember that was ever brought up before. And it's a very cop eye thing to pick out. And then she took her car as almost as if she was hiding it, took all her stuff and packed up and went. And we had to retrieve the car from her parents' house because he and Buchanan had to follow it all the way back to the Sallyport, leaving no time before the CERT team arrived to plant evidence. The whole conspiracy thing falls apart. And I really think people want to I think there's just disordered people who want to see a criminal get over on the system. I think there's disordered people who really like the feral cruelty of Karen Reed's campaign. And I think that there are real people out there who have been conned by this innocence fraud campaign. And they've gotten caught up. And it's not so much that Turtle Boy is so influential. It's the people that are like you that are the most convincing. The people who are just interested in true crime or interested in the true case, who are making comments and reaffirming this kind of viewpoint. Oh, yes. Wasn't that weird? The butt dials. And no one said anything. And what? And what? And they didn't look at anyone else and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it is the greatest example of not seeing the forest for the trees, you know? I mean, they're missing the big picture. They get so in the minutia of these tiny little things. And there's tiny little anomalies like that all through life. It's filled with that, coincidences and anomalies. And this movement will exploit it. And mistakes made by people, because people are human on reports. We're not robots. We're not machines who do everything perfectly all the time. I mean, look at yesterday where Monday, excuse me. See? Or me. Or look at that example of me just confusing yesterday for Monday. Remember Monday when he was making his grand speech? How upset he was. It was the 8:30 hearing, that to be accused of withholding information about defense witnesses, and And the judge says, I don't have that. Whereas we're being referred to as saying that he wasn't going to go with the dog bite stuff. And he says, it's on page 3. It's on page 3. Turns out it's on page 4. Did David Yannetti just make him a factual mistake about where something was? Shocking. Because we're human. We're not robots. Amazing. Is it a conspiracy on the defense? Is that a conspiracy on the defense side? Should we make a new story around that? This stuff is wild. Thanks, Tom Hendricks, for becoming a member. Nothing. Thanks for becoming a member. Nice to see you.
Evidence which led you to believe that Mr. Abel was involved in the death of Mr. O'Keefe. What would you have done?
Objection. Ask it differently.
With regard to, again, you testified beyond January 29th. At any point in your investigation, did you find any information or evidence leading you to believe that Brian Albert was involved in the death of John O'Keefe?
Objection. I'll allow it.
No.
Now, if you had found information leading to that conclusion or evidence leading to that, what would you have done?
Objection. Then we'll allow it.
Wait, wait, excuse me, Trooper Proctor, I'm confused. You didn't find that it was being reported in the media that the Alberts might have been involved? Meaning leaked by Karen Reed and her defense team to her lapdog blogger, Turtle Boy? That's not evidence? Shocker. Shocker that that's not evidence. It's a really interesting situation we have here with such a absolutely sleazy, totally, how do we say, lawless defense team up against a really by the book. It's not unusual in that, but but it's so lawless, so openly, blatantly, flagrantly. Not just lying to the media, lying to the press, playing it out in the court of public opinion, but lying to the court. Using their own leaks as evidence in hearings. You just can't do in motions. You can't do that. But these are the kind of people who will be happy. I mean, this movement is done by lawyers, happy to lie for their accused killer clients and sleep perfectly fine at night. And it's people like Michael Proctor who have emotions over something really horrible and express it very directly and maybe in offensive language. But you should be horrified by this case. You should be outraged by what she did. And I'm hoping that the jury is picking up on Karen Reed's attitude. Absolutely without conscience. No remorse, no conscience. This was supposed to be the man she loved for 2 years, lived with, helped raise his nieces and nephews with. And this is how she acts. His clothes are held up in the state that they're in. No emotion. She looks like, I mean, it's like she's in a boring lecture at a university. That's her attitude. The only time that she really shows emotion is when Trooper Proctor is being attacked. Then it's like a vampire. That's her lifeblood. She comes alive. Blood sport. Loves it. She's a dangerous, disordered woman if you're not seeing it. But like I said, this movement takes on the personality It has the personality of the murderers that it defends, and it has zero morals, zero conscience, totally lawless. And I'm talking about the wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted movement, innocence fraud in all its forms.
Not only myself, but members of my office would have pursued that,
Regardless of his position, correct?
regardless of what he does for a profession.
You want me to approach?
Yes.
My apologies, John. Can you, document I showed you the other day, do you recognize that?
That is text communications between me and my high school buddies.
And sir, if I could direct your attention within there to page 2535.
Yes, sir.
You were asked some questions about text on that page, but also there's a text on that page that begins with, they arrived at house together, correct?
Correct.
And what is the date and time associated with that text message that you sent?
That was sent on January 29, 2022 at 11 p.m.
And what is the content, or what did you send to that group, in that text message?
The message reads, they arrived at the house together, got into an argument. She was driving and left.
So that's also information that you had late in the evening of January 29th, 2022, correct?
Objection. Inform that, Steve.
With respect to that information you conveyed in that text message, when did you learn that?
During the course of the day on the 29th.
May I approach, Ron?
Yes.
Mr. Retreat?
I've never seen so many objections to form. Lally has so much trouble with form. Usually you see that a lot in a civil.
Now, you were asking questions about people that you spoke to on the 29th, correct?
Yes.
And that included Brian Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe.
Usually seen those kind of objections in a civil deposition. Sorry, I'll go back for those that missed it. These kinds of objections to form. And I wonder if he's having, but he seems to have it all the time, these objections, which are form objections to the form of the question, sustained all the time. I'm wondering, never seen a lawyer have so much issue with it. I was curious if it's because he's confused, if he's on, if he's cross-examining, or if he's doing a direct, or because so many of these witnesses, really, he took Proctor, which he could have tried this case totally without Proctor. The defense could have called Proctor. This is what I thought they were going to do. I think smartly he didn't, and he got those text messages out for the Commonwealth. So we're not hiding a thing, guys, jury. There's no conspiracy here. We'll show you these text messages. They aren't pretty. They don't make you love Michael Proctor, but you can understand a little bit, or at least I do, where they're coming from.
Now, you were asking questions about people that you spoke to on the 29th, correct?
Yes.
And that included Brian Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Kerry Roberts, is that correct?
Trooper DeChico and Trooper Dunn interviewed Miss Roberts.
And my apologies. When I was saying you, I meant collectively.
Yes.
But you specifically yourself and Sergeant Mechanic, you also spoke with the defendant on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
And that would have been prior to any of the text communications that were contained within that chat with your friends, correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you something about charging decisions. Is that something that you make in this case or any case?
I don't make any charging decisions. We're essentially fact finders.
So as far as what Miss Reed was charged with or when she was charged with it, that's not something that's within your purview, correct?
No, not at all.
For those in the back, did you hear that? He didn't pick the charges. He doesn't charge Karen Reed with anything. Little hard, right? When you're have a conspiracy and you have to control everything and pin everything on Karen Reed because no one likes Karen Reed. Another thing I was thinking about a lot, I think everybody's thinking about O.J. Simpson. I played an interview with Nancy Grace today where she brought up O.J. Simpson in this trial because that's where the defense also put out a lot of nonsense pre-trial for their killer client, and that's where in the case where the Innocence Project was birthed from, the O.J. Simpson case. But the difference between Mark Fuhrman and Proctor is that all the negative stuff that came out about Proctor came out on cross from the defense. It wasn't put up by the state of California first. And so it was a huge shock. And also, Fuhrman literally had the ability to plant evidence. And when he was asked whether he ever planted evidence, he took the fifth, which looks bad. So all those things, and also Rodney King has just happened. I don't think that there's going to be jurors. I mean, the only thing that they could get, and this is get really upset about and connect it to a social issue, is some kind of misogyny. And if there's a female juror that feels like Karen Reed's a victim of misogyny and wants to take revenge, I over this, I don't know. I don't know. I maybe, but that's not uncommon also to take these kind of campaigns for guilty people to make them look innocent and attach it to some kind of social movement, racism, to get anti-Americanism. We were outcasts. Sort of like, right? Always attached to a tunnel vision investigation, sloppy tunnel vision investigation.
Now, specifically, you were asked some questions about some text messages between yourself and Trooper Chico in regard to the medical exam, correct?
Correct.
And those occurred in April of 2022, is that correct?
Yes.
Was the defendant, Ms. Reed, charged with murder in April of 2022?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No.
That wasn't until June of 2022, correct?
It's correct.
And that was at the conclusion of the grand jury, is that correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
And you're aware that there was a grand jury in this case, correct?
Objection. I'll withdraw that.
Okay.
Yes.
Answer that.
And are you aware of certain witnesses that testified at the grand jury?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Yes.
Are you aware that Dr. Sporty Bello testified at the grand jury?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Yes.
And so, false reason then that the defendant wasn't charged with murder until after the grand jury concluded and Dr. Sporty Bello had testified before that grand jury, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, the Albert family that you were familiar with some members of, that's not an entity, correct?
No.
Individual members of a family, some you know, some you may not know, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Watch your phone, Mr. Brown.
Certainly not. How many members of the Albert family did you know when you started this investigation in January, or when you received this call on January 29th, 2022?
Julie, Chris Albert, Colin, and Kevin Albert.
Now, you were asked some questions about interviewing Julie Albert and Chris Albert at their home on February 10th, correct?
Yes.
Now, with respect to that date, had you ever been to that home prior to February 10th?
I'd not been to that. That's kind of their new home. I'd never been to their new home or the previous home either.
Now, as far as conversations with either Julie or Chris Albert, when was the last time you talked to them before you interviewed them on February 10th?
believe I had reached out to Julie to coordinate the interview, but prior to this case, there was that one random text message she sent me and my sister when I was going on a family ski trip. They weren't a part of it. She wanted me to take a video of my sister skiing, but
That was in February 2022. Correct?
yeah.
So what my question is prior to February 10th, 2022, prior to any arrangements to schedule an interview for February 10th, when was the last time that you spoke to either Julie Albert or Chris Albert, if you know?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Now, with regard to that text message in regard to skiing in late February 2022, you were shown that text message, correct?
Yes.
Was there any response from you?
No.
Did you have any further communication with Julie Albert after that interview on January 29th, 2022, related to this investigation?
I recall the serving her for grand jury. I know she wanted to kind of have an idea of what the process was like. So there's communications regarding that.
And was that something that was solely done with Julie Albert or other witnesses or what?
All the witnesses that were called in the grand jury, it's unusual for, the majority of civilians to be called in the grand jury. So they obviously have questions about the process.
Now, as far as babysitting for your children, is that something that Julie Albert ever did?
No.
And as far as those text communications between yourself and your sister regarding that, was that something that you had asked for or something that your sister had suggested?
Yeah, my sister had suggested that. We never followed up with having Julie watch my kids.
Now, you were asked some questions about text messages with your sister Cote, correct?
Correct.
And I believe a couple times you would use the term, well, let me ask you this first. With regard to from January 29th throughout at least January, February 2022, this was this case became something that was on the news on a fairly regular basis, correct?
News and social media, yes.
And so when you were using the term in describing what you spoke to your sister about as far as newsworthy, what did you mean by that?
My sister lives in Canton, so there's a lot of, as well on the news and social media stuff that was being discussed on those platforms.
Now, as far as the discussions that you had with regard to your sister, how would you describe or how would you characterize the type of information that you shared with her, if any?
Just general information, nothing specific about the case.
You were also asked about a specific text from your sister on January 30th. It started out with, I believe it was Jesus Christ. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was in reference to the body of Mr. O'Keefe being found on Brian Albert's lawn, correct?
Correct.
And so she's asking you about that on January 30th, correct?
Yes.
So fair to reason that that wasn't something that you shared with her prior to January 30th, correct?
Correct.
And something that you hadn't shared with her at all at that point that you received that text communication, correct?
Mr.
Correct.
Standish to your form. Watch how you ask these questions, Mr. Lally, as your witness.
Yes, sir. With regard to that information, as far as who the homeowner was, what, if anything, had you shared with your sister Courtney prior to you receiving that text from her, indicating her knowledge?
Yeah, I don't recall sharing anything with in regards to the homeowner.
Now, in regard to any issues of a gift or request for a gift, how would you characterize that? Was that serious? Was that in jest? How would you characterize that?
I didn't take.
I'll allow it.
I didn't take that offer seriously. And as I had mentioned, I believe on Monday, that I didn't ask for a gift. I never received one. I kind of said, get my wife a gift. She had been home about 10 straight nights with the boys. We had another homicide the week before. So that was my response. Get Elizabeth one.
Yeah, these guys work really long, hard hours for very little thank yous. And their wives are often home alone. They risk their life doing this stuff and their sanity. I mean, this gift stuff, it's just, distraction Jackson is really right on the money, I think, with him. Just keep distracting everybody. Keep them off the main point of the case. Try to make Karen Reed look like a victim. But if this was the explosive thing that they had, let's see what else they have. But is this the thing they have that no jury could convict after this? I don't know. And Nancy Grace made the point. She said, if basically what she was saying, she goes, this is the same stuff OJ did. But it was incredibly different. I mean, let's look at the differences. I don't think I have to do them once again in this episode, but very different time, very different feel, very different. You also have a celebrity defendant who's likable. Karen Reed is not very likable. And her behavior in this trial has been off the charts. Crazy. I mean, not crazy, understandable. I understand it as the behavior of a psychopath. But to other people's eye, it looks bizarre. But this is how they act in trials. They don't have feelings. They don't connect with people. It's all about strategy. How can she get out of it? They're cunning and they're clever. But they're, I think they're being given a lot more, psychopaths are given a lot more credit for their intelligence than they deserve. Most are below average IQ. Very few have high IQs, but they're calculating and cunning. And they're chameleons. Remember, everybody liked Karen Reed, who met Karen Reed in this case. So that kind of takes the sting out of we all wanted to blame it on Karen Reed because we didn't like her. Everyone testified that they liked Karen Reed. They were shocked that Karen Reed didn't want to maintain a relationship with them. And boy, didn't she. And we talk about the Adelson case. For everyone who's left comments, I loved your Adelson coverage. Why can't you see that this is a conspiracy? Karen Reed did exactly the same thing that Wendy Adelson did. Exactly the same thing. Never talked to the Markells again. Took her kids, left from the scene of the crime. Vamoosed out of there. She didn't want to comfort the children. She just wanted to get her stuff, get out of there. Delete the Ring videos and get out of there. That's my take on it.
She never received one.
Now, you were asked some questions about Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
And as far as what, if any, information did you have as far as Colin Albert and his being at 34 Fairview at the same time as anyone from coming back from the waterfall?
It was my understanding Colin arrived later on to just see his cousin's birthday. He didn't stay that long, maybe an hour, a little over an hour. And as he was leaving, I think he ran into his aunt and uncle as his ride had arrived out front and left at sometime around 12:10 a.m.
Was that information that you had prior to your interview with Colin Albert?
We knew Colin wasn't at the house. The timing was provided by Colin.
And at any point in time in your investigation, what, if any, evidence did you ever receive that Colin Albert was at 34 Fairview at the same time as Mr. O'Keefe or the defendant?
Based on Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone location data using his Waze app, Colin Albert is leaving around like 12:10 a.m. Mr. O'Keefe is about a half a mile away at 12:20 a.m. So they did not cross paths.
Now, Mr. Jackson was asking about some people as far as interviews or later in October or so of 2022 or beyond. You were given 5 names as far as Brian Albert Jr., Julie Nagel, Miss Kent, Miss Fabiano, Miss Alba, and Miss Levinson, and Colin Albert, correct?
Yes.
And then you were asked about 3 people that you had interviewed, and then were asked if there was only 1 person left, that being Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
That math match up as far as 5 people, 3 given, and only 1 person not interviewed?
No.
Now, with reference to Miss Kent, Miss Fabiano, and Miss Alba, to your knowledge, have they been interviewed at any point in time?
No.
And why not?
They weren't present for when the adults had arrived back from the waterfall.
So they had left 34 Fairview, like Colin Albert, prior to the waterfall people coming in.
Objection.
Sustained is that film.
What, if any, information did you have with regards to the whereabouts of Miss Kent, Miss Fabiano, Miss Alba, and Colin Albert in relation to 34 Fairview and the arrival of people from the waterfall?
They had left the residence.
So, with respect to Colin Albert, why was it that he was interviewed and not Miss Kent, Miss Fabiano, and Miss Alba?
Colin was falsely accused of
Objection.
Can you answer that same question Mr. Lally asked you differently?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead and answer it.
Colin was the subject of a third-party culprit that had no evidence to back that up.
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
That had no evidence to back that up, that he was involved whatsoever.
Okay, guys, for those in the back, Colin Albert, bang bang video nonsense, no evidence to back it up, nothing, zero zip. But for all the Free Karen readers, well, you can't take a cop's word, right? This is the biggest anti-cop movement to Free Karen Read. Karen Read's words are golden, even though she's changed her story a zillion times. But you can't trust Michael Proctor. You got to trust Karen Read and her lying defense team. That's my opinion, that they're lying. And I think the evidence shows it. When they accuse his cousins of being the McCabe's, throws their picture out for everyone to see. Oh. And I mean, it's just, I keep getting the same thought again, over and over again while I'm watching this, is feeling people are at a disadvantage up against these non-feeling antisocial personalities or psychopathic lawyers like Jackson and Yannetti. So I see Proctor looking weary. He just wants to get out of there. He doesn't want to go into a lot of detail. It's emotional. It takes stuff out of it. It takes a lot out of him to just testify and go through all this stuff. But for Yannetti and Jackson, they can do this all day long. There's no emotion involved.
My office and myself felt the need to interview Colin, sit him down and get his story, his facts of that evening. So that's why we interviewed him at that date and time later on.
And when you say we, do you recall who was present with you when you interviewed Colin Albert?
Trooper Zachary Clark.
Are you aware of Sergeant Mechanic getting screenshots from both Colin Albert and from Miss Allie McCabe in relation to text communications they had about picking up Colin Albert from 34 Fairview on January 29th?
Yes.
You were asked some questions about Miss McCabe's cell phone. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as any material on that phone, are you an expert when it comes to cell phone abstractions and what different material may mean within a Cellbrite abstraction?
No, that's left to Trooper Garino in our office.
And it will be explained by Ian Whiffen from Cellbrite. even more about those extractions and what they mean. Heisenberg, thanks so much. Her lawyers screamed frame job, but still didn't ask 2 questions. Who killed John O'Keefe? Why are you framing my client? They know exactly why they didn't ask them those questions, Roberta. Right. Because they'd say Karen Reed. Who killed John O'Keefe? Karen Reed. Why are you framing? We're not framing them. They haven't made a dent in establishing third party, but because they got a judge, most judge would have said there's no evidence for this. You can't develop it. But this judge is so defense friendly that they can develop it all day long. And hence his text messages come in.
Are you aware of reports regarding those searches from Trooper Nicholas Carino, a Miss Jessica Hyde, and a Mr. Ian Whip?
I am aware of those, yes.
And those are people who are experts, or those are people who have special knowledge or specialized knowledge as it relates to Cellbrite technology that you do not, correct?
Objection.
Form of the question, sustained.
What, if any, knowledge are you aware of Trooper Nicholas Carino, Miss Jessica Hyde, and Mr. Ian Whiffen having with respect to Cellbrite or cell phone technology that you do not have?
Objection.
Allowing it under voting.
Donna, may we approach?
Sure.
You are
So they're just going to push their luck with the judge because she's a pushover as much as they can. And let's just take a look at Karen Reed. Didn't go as planned, huh? Not as happy. This wasn't the slam dunk you thought it was. I mean, you could see that they were, in the week. I kept saying, why is she so happy? She was waiting for this to happen. And you can see her reaction. She's mugging for the camera through some of Trooper Proctor's cross-examination. So inappropriate. I hope that some jurors took notice that you don't, like a Muppet with your mouth wide open and your eyes wide open in happy surprise at Trooper Proctor's answer that he didn't like Yannetti and other things.
Procedure on?
Yes.
Let me rephrase that just a little. As far as you're aware that Trooper Nicholas Carino, Miss Jessica Hyde, and Mr. Ian Whiffen have all looked at Miss McCabe's Cellbrite and extraction information, correct?
Yes.
And their knowledge, their specialized knowledge in regard to those areas exceeds your own, correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as your conversations with Kevin Albert, how would you characterize those in relation to this investigation?
They had nothing to do with this investigation. Like I said, we were working a cold case together. We also work on other cases together that, unattended deaths that I'll respond to, a potential suicide or an overdose in the town of Canton that I'll respond to. But the topic of our conversations were in regards to the cold case or unresolved case that we're working together.
Donna, may I approach?
Yes.
Presenting the documents I did the other day. You recognize that?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
I do.
What do you recognize that?
Text communication with Kevin Albert.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to debate stamp pages of 2600 and 2601.
Yes, sir.
Now, in regard to activities on that particular date, you had indicated that you had conversations with Kevin Albert about working a cold case from the town of Canton, correct?
Yes.
And specifically on that date, where did the two of you go?
I recall going down to the Cape to at least interview at least one person of interest.
And that was down in the town of Sandwich, to be specific. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in reference to Kevin Albert leaving his badge in your car, do you recall that?
I do.
If I could direct your attention to page 2602. And what, if any, text communication is contained on that page as far as you asking Kevin Albert any questions about his address?
After I informed Kevin Albert I had located his badge, I follow up, what's your address? I will drop it off after the gym.
You're asking his address because you don't know his address, correct?
Correct.
Sustained.
Why are you asking for his address?
I've never been to his house and I don't know where he lives.
You're so close with him that you don't know where his house is, correct?
Sustained.
I mean, these are exactly the kind of things the defense does and seems to get away with, but okay. I mean, but I guess it's a cross, so maybe I'm thinking of Alan Jackson's cross. He hasn't done any directs yet. So, but they're all kind of like that, if I'm remembering from what I watched of the music maker. I'll think of it in a second.
I approach just to retrieve your arm.
Yes.
Phil Spector. It's been a long day, guys. Long day, guys. So Alan Jackson was the prosecutor. Prosecuted Phil Spector twice. And got a conviction for his murder of Lana Clarkson.
You were asked some questions about ring videos from One Meadows Avenue, Mr. O'Keefe's home. Is that correct?
Yes.
And to be clear, did you delete any ring videos from Mr. O'Keefe's account, either on his app, on his phone, or from the materials that you received pursuant to the search?
Absolutely not.
Now, when you saw that there were ring videos missing from times that you expected videos to be, specifically what I'm asking about is Ms. Reed or the defendant's arrival at the home after leaving Fairview Road, and Ms. McCabe, Ms. Roberts, and the defendant's departure from One Meadows to Fairview Road later on that morning. What did you do?
I reached out to Ring several different times. They informed me if a video is deleted, there's no digital footprint of that. It's essentially kind of gone forever.
Lucky for Karen Reed. But I think it'll be a question mark, not on the defense side, that Karen Reed somehow, that one of the police officers did it. But look at the ring footage that's missing. Karen Reed showing her cracked taillight to Carrie and Jen, strangely missing. Who could have done it? It's a giant mystery, guys. Come on.
And with respect to that time frame, what, if any, other additional steps did you take to try to retrieve that video? Was there a second search warrant, sir?
Yes.
You were looking for additional information from that same ring video, correct?
Objection sustained.
What, if anything, were you looking for in that second search?
There's additional video.
Now, you were asked some questions about notes from Trooper DeChico, correct?
Correct.
And as far as that 0041 note, do you know what that means?
That just tells me it's a time.
And do you know specifically whether or not that is something that Trooper DeChico saw or something that Trooper DeChico was looking for?
That's something Trooper DeChico could answer for.
I may have just a moment. Your Honor.
Yes.
Heisenberg says Karen knew the exact pattern to reverse without touching his car. When it was time to leave, she had to get as close as possible on camera. Doesn't it look like that? Just love tapping it. And you have to remember that Karen Reed, go back to my episode, did Karen Reed orchestrate her own innocence fraud campaign? Or I go through the search warrant on her 2 phones, and I always wonder if she had 2 phones here that were communicating sometimes through a proxy, sometimes directly to Aiden Kearney and Yannetti and Jackson were having conversations and text messages with Aiden Kearney. And that's going to be a really interesting sequel trial to this trial, which is Aiden Kearney's witness harassment trial. But she sure knew that that was the talking point. Oh, they got it wrong. I blew out my taillight here in this video, not after 5 in the morning, 5:08, not when I dropped off, quote unquote, John O'Keefe. Give me a break. She barely touches his no taillight. Meanwhile, look at 34 Fairview, taillight everywhere. They were still finding it days after. And I love how they say they were interviewing the witnesses February 10th when this happened on the 29th. It wasn't a giant mystery, guys. Who did it? I'll give you a little hint. It was the person who said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Could I have hit him? This is all my fault. This is my fault. I hit him. That one. I know it's a shocker. Shocking that this isn't some Sherlock Holmes-like mystery.
So you were asked some questions about Sally Port video at Canton Police Station, correct?
Yes.
When you arrived at the Sally Port garage of the Canton Police Station sometime around or shortly after 5:30 p.m., correct?
Yes.
That 5:30 p.m. time, is that before or after 5:07 a.m.?
After.
And 5:07 a.m. is when the Exhibit 6, video number, I believe, 153, with the defendant backing out of the garage where you testified on Monday, you observed some damage to the taillight, correct?
Correct.
You're aware of some other ring video from Mr. O'Keefe's house showing the defendant, Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe, arriving at his house, in which you can see damage to the right passenger taillight, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of a cruiser camera video from the Canton Police Station, Police Department, specifically Lieutenant Ray, going to One Meadows Ave at 8:22 in the morning on the 29th, in which you can also observe damage to the taillight?
Objection.
Sustained is to the form.
As far as 8:22 in the morning, what, if any, video from One Meadows Avenue are you aware of depicting the defendant's taillight?
Canton Police Department went to conduct a well-being check, and on the dash cruiser camera, you can see the back of Miss Reed's vehicle and the right taillight to be broken and missing pieces.
Yeah, Karen Reader, I call it. What? Why come the belt is missing? Why come his shoe is missing? Because that's often, and it was interesting in this testimony, in his direct testimony, it was hugely significant that John O'Keefe was found with one shoe, that his shoe came off when he was hit. That's often the state that people are in when they have been hit by a car or a large vehicle. So pretty interesting that the shoe was found after the nor'easter snow melted. But these kind of ridiculous, small, petty questions that don't go anywhere, that get answered, it just, the free Karen readers just move on to the next, on to the next mini conspiracy that gets answered in tomorrow's testimony.
And as far as your time at the home in Dighton, the defendant's vehicle was towed from that location on that day, correct?
Correct.
And what, if any, video are you aware of from that driveway, which depicts the right rear passenger side tail light of the defendant's vehicle.
Yeah, as the vehicle's being put on the tow truck, you can make out that there's some pieces missing.
Now, sir, if I could turn you back to those text messages with your friends, January 29th, 2022. With that time in mind, at that point in time, well, let me ask before, as far as all those other videos that we talked to, all of those videos precede your time in the Sally Port garage at 5:30 p.m. on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Now, with reference to, you mentioned in your testimony the other day, earlier, that at some point in time later in the day or early in that evening, you had met for a debriefing with yourself and the other troopers involved in the investigation on January 29th. Is that correct?
Yes.
So fair to say the information that had been collected by yourself and the other troopers on January 29th, you had that in mind, or you were aware of that when you were involved in these text communications with your friends, correct?
Yes.
And so were you, at that time that you're texting with your friends, you had seen the defendant's vehicle?
Correct. Yes.
And you had seen the damage to the taillight, correct?
Yes.
And you were aware that Lieutenant Tully and the CERT team had conducted a search around 34 Fairview and recovered Mr. O'Keefe's sneaker and a taillight.
Objection.
Sustained is too far.
What, if anything, were you aware of in regard to Lieutenant Tully doing with the CERT team at 34 Fairview earlier that day?
Detective Lieutenant Tully and the CERT team conducted a search, discovered several pieces of broken taillight pieces, as well as Mr. O'Keefe's missing shoe.
And the shoe that Lieutenant Tully and the CERT team had retrieved, what, if anything, did you observe in relation to that and the shoe that you and Sergeant Mechanic had retrieved from the Good Samaritan Hospital?
Yeah, they were matched. They were both black Nike sneakers with the white logo.
Now, you had talked to first responders, correct?
Yes.
And that included firefighter Flamati,
Correct.
and that included Sergeant Good.
Yes.
You had done interviews with regard to Brian Albert, correct?
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Correct.
Matthew McCabe, correct?
Yes.
The defendant
Yes.
and other troopers from your unit had also interviewed Kerry Roberts, correct?
Yes.
So you're aware of statements that were attributed by Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe to the defendant as far as what she told them earlier that morning?
Yes.
And you're aware of statements that Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts had made to the troopers in regard to what they had observed that morning?
Yes.
Now, were you aware that both Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts indicated in interviews on January 29th that when they had got to 34 Fairview Road, they could not see Mr. O'Keefe's body? However, the defendant sort of bolted out of the backseat of the vehicle directly over to Mr. O'Keefe's body.
Objection.
You can ask that differently, Mr. Lally.
With respect to the statements from Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts in regard to their arrival at 34 Fairview around 6 a.m. in the morning, what, if anything, stood out to you or were you aware of in relation to those statements?
Yeah, from those statements, as Miss Roberts was driving down Fairview, Miss McCabe was in the passenger seat, Miss Reed was in the back. Obviously, whiteout conditions as they're coming down, like that slight hill, getting just before the left side of the property. Miss McCabe, Miss Roberts indicated that. Miss Reed said, "There he is. I see him." And Miss McCabe, Miss Roberts didn't know what Miss Reed was talking about. They stopped the car. Miss Reed ran directly over to John O'Keefe's body. And even when Miss Reed had exited the vehicle, Miss McCabe and Miss Roberts still didn't know what was going on and what she was running to.
These cops deal with people all the time. They know that that's hugely significant. That anyone else who didn't know where he was wouldn't have found him. The reason Karen Reed found John O'Keefe is because she knew where he was, because she left him there. And boy, in her text messages, she says she accuses Trooper Proctor of leaving John O'Keefe or the McCabes or the Alberts, I don't know who it was at that time, but of leaving him there to die like roadkill. That's what you did, Karen Reed. You know what transpired because you were there. It was your actions. You were motivated to do it. I don't believe that you were so inebriated out of your mind. You didn't know what you were doing. No one on the scene, including cops who were trained to look for that kind of thing, said, oh, she was so inebriated out of her mind. I could tell she was drunk. She was walking straight lines after 9 drinks. And driving pretty well, I may add. Shockingly well. Aiming your car perfectly. 508. To hit John O'Keefe's car just a little bit, just a little love tap.
Now, were you aware from your conversation with firefighter Famati that the defendant had stated, I hit him, in the presence of firefighter Famati earlier that morning?
Yes.
And were you also aware of statements the defendant made to other first responders about her being or getting into an argument with Mr. O'Keefe as she was dropping him off at 34 Fairview, indicating the last time she saw him?
Later on in subsequent interviews.
So this is becoming repetitive, but basically what it became is it became a review for everyone to review what had happened to John O'Keefe. Let's review the evidence, jury. Why did Trooper Proctor have so many strong feelings towards Karen Reed and David Yannetti? Let's review what they did to him, the campaign, and let's review some of the evidence. Nice job, Lally. And he gets so criticized, so underappreciated for her. I know he's not a flashy lawyer. Would I pick him out of all the lawyers that I like watching trials to watch it on my iPhone? No. Or my tab or my laptop? No. But boy, has he been effective for me in this case. Am I the target? Maybe I'm not the target juror. By the way, I have jury duty coming up. I can't push it anymore. I'm going to get thrown out of there so fast. Fractured Fairy Tales, thanks for the super sticker. Appreciate it. But boy, was this a good review of the evidence against Karen Reed. Talk about turning a negative into a positive and communicating to the jury. We're not hiding a thing. You want to know who's hiding things and making things up? Look to the defense table and the defendant. And while you're looking over there, check out the defendant's demeanor during this trial. That'll tell you everything you need to know about what happened in this case and who she is. But the sequel to this trial really is Aidan Carney's witness harassment trial. And if this succeeds and she gets totally acquitted for everything she's charged with in this case, this means we're going to see more of these kind of campaigns. Each campaign furthers another campaign. They learn things from each other. They fuel each other. Because when you have a client where you can't get them off on the evidence, you got to make a campaign. You got to make a movement. You got to put pressure on from the outside to our legal system, because we like to think our legal system is in a bubble and can't be touched by the outside opinions and outside forces and public opinion. But boy, is that not true. They really thought the main plan, you have to remember, was that this was never supposed to go to trial. Aidan Carney promised it to his audience that it would never go to trial. Remember how he also promised that the FBI would be coming in any day? What happened to that? No one asks. Just on to the next. Sally Port videos, belts, shoes, on to the next conspiracy. Don't get conned. If you don't think you're looking around for the mark, You can't figure out who it is. It's you. That's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. I'll be back tomorrow to stream the trial. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow morning.